The echo of ancient stars. Captain Thomas Harrison never expected silence to be the most unsettling part of war. Standing at the observation deck of Forward Operating Base Helios, he watched the purple clouds of Kepler 186f swirl beneath twin moons. The base, perched on a floating archipelago of mineral-rich islands, had been quiet for 3 days straight, no bombardments, no firefights, nothing but the occasional hum of maintenance drones. The war with the Vesperians had raged for 15 years, yet Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was missing from their understanding of the conflict. He absently touched the ancient pendant at his neck, a family heirloom whose markings had never been fully understood. "Captain, we've got movement in Sector 7, Lieutenant Reese's voice crackled through his calm. Thomas straightened, his hand instinctively moving to his pulse rifle. "What kind of movement?" "Single target, appears to be a Vesperian scout." "But sir, they're not using any stealth tech. They're just walking." Thomas frowned. The Vesperians never moved without purpose, and they certainly never exposed themselves so brazenly. "I'm heading there now. Keep eyes on target but do not engage." As he made his way through the base's winding corridors, the pendant grew unusually warm against his skin. He'd never understood why his grandmother had insisted he take it, claiming it had been in their family for generations before Earth even achieved spaceflight. The observation post in Sector 7 offered a clear view of the valley below. Through his binoculars, Thomas spotted the Vesperian, tall, crystalline-skinned, moving with an almost dreamlike quality. But what caught his attention wasn't the alien's behavior, it was the sound. The Vesperian was humming. The melody carried across the valley, hauntingly familiar yet impossible to place. Without thinking, Thomas found himself humming along, the tune rising from some deep, forgotten place in his memory. His pendant grew hot enough to burn. "Sir?" Lieutenant Reese whispered, but Thomas barely heard her. The humming had become something more, a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very rocks beneath their feet. The Vesperian stopped, turned, and locked eyes with Thomas across the impossible distance. In that moment, the pendant burst apart in his hands, revealing not metal or stone, but crystalline structures that matched the patterns on the Vesperian skin. The pieces began to glow, floating in the air between them, and the melody that had been humming through Thomas's mind suddenly exploded into full, magnificent clarity. It wasn't just a song, it was a key. A key to understanding why two species had been locked in a war that neither truly wanted, fighting for reasons that suddenly seemed as insubstantial as morning mist. The floating crystals formed patterns in the air, ancient symbols that both human and Vesperian recognized without knowing how. "Captain," Reese breathed, "what's happening?" Thomas watched as more Vesperians emerged from their hiding places, all humming the same melody, all moving with the same purposeful grace. And in that moment, he understood, they weren't coming to fight. They were coming to remember. The war that had consumed so many lives, the conflict that had seemed so vital and unavoidable, was about to change forever. Because sometimes, the most powerful weapons aren't the ones that destroy. Sometimes, they're the ones that help us remember what we've forgotten. Whispers from beyond. The crystals danced in the air before Thomas, each shard catching the light of the twin moons and fracturing it into impossible colors. Around him, the humming had grown stronger, a chorus of voices both human and Vesperian joining the ancient melody that seemed to pulse from the very ground beneath them. "Sir, command is demanding an update," Lieutenant Reese's voice wavered with uncertainty. "What do I tell them?" Thomas watched as more crystals emerged from the ground, rising like luminous flowers breaking through soil. Each one added its own note to the growing symphony, creating harmonies that spoke of times long past, of histories forgotten by both species. "Tell them." He paused, choosing his words carefully, "tell them we're experiencing first contact." Again. The lead Vesperian, the scout they'd first spotted, had drawn closer. Its crystalline skin refracted the light of the floating shards, creating patterns that matched the ancient symbols now hovering in the air. When it spoke, its voice carried the same melodic quality as the humming. "You carry the key song," it said, gesturing to the remnants of Thomas's pendant. We had thought all were lost in the great silence. More human soldiers had gathered at the observation post, their weapons lowered, transfixed by the scene unfolding before them. The melody seemed to touch something in each of them, awakening memories that couldn't possibly be their own. "The key song?" Thomas asked, watching as the crystal shards began to arrange themselves into complex geometric patterns. "My grandmother gave me this pendant. She said it had been in our family since before we reached the stars." The Vesperian's eyes, faceted like diamonds, reflected understanding. "Your ancestors were guardians, like ours. Before the discord, before the silence, before we forgot who we were to each other." Through the calm, Thomas could hear command demanding explanations, ordering tactical responses, but their voices seemed distant, unimportant compared to the truth unfolding before him. The melody had become a bridge, connecting not just minds but memories buried deep in both species' collective consciousness. "The war," Thomas said slowly, understanding dawning like a sunrise, "it's not about resources or territory, is it? It's about this. About what we lost." The Vesperian moved closer, its crystalline form catching and reflecting the light of the mysterious symbols. "The discord came generations ago, severing the song that bound all conscious beings. In our confusion, in our silence, we turned on each other, forgetting we were once one chorus." More Vesperians had emerged, and with them came more crystals, more symbols, more pieces of the ancient melody. Human soldiers found themselves humming along, not understanding the words but feeling their truth in their bones. Lieutenant Reese stepped forward, her own voice joining the harmony. "But why now? Why has this been hidden for so long?" The lead Vesperian's form shimmered with what might have been emotion. "The song cannot be silenced forever. It sleeps in your DNA, in our crystalline cores, waiting for the right moment, the right combination of voices to awaken it." Above them, the twin moons seemed to pulse in rhythm with the melody. The symbols floating in the air began to spin faster, creating complex patterns that told stories of a time when humans and Vesperians had been more than enemies, they had been custodians of something greater than themselves. Thomas felt the truth of it resonating through his entire being. The war, the hatred, the fear, it had all been a symptom of something deeper. A universe trying to remember itself, trying to heal a wound so old that both species had forgotten it existed. "Command isn't going to like this," Reese muttered, but there was no real concern in her voice. She, like everyone else present, could feel the rightness of what was happening. "Command doesn't have to like it," Thomas replied, watching as more crystals emerged from the ground, each one adding its voice to the growing chorus. "They just have to listen. Because that's what had been missing all along. Not weapons, not strategies, not better ways to kill each other. What both species had lost, what they had been searching for in all the wrong places, was the ability to hear the song that had once united them all. And now, on this floating island under twin moons, that song was finally breaking through the silence of ages. The harmonious uprising. The news spread faster than any order could contain it. Across Kepler, 186F, battles ground to a halt as the song rippled through both human and Vesperian forces. From orbital stations to ground installations, soldiers found themselves caught in a melody that seemed to rewrite everything they thought they knew about their enemy. Thomas stood in the command center of Forward Operating Base Helios, surrounded by holographic displays showing the unprecedented phenomenon. Everywhere, the same scene repeated, weapons lowered, voices raised in harmony, crystals emerging from seemingly solid ground. "They're calling it the harmonious uprising," Colonel Marcus Webb said, his weathered face illuminated by the shifting displays. 15 years of war, and it ends with a song. High Command thinks we've all lost our minds. The lead Vesperian, who had introduced itself as Lyra, stood beside them, its crystalline form humming with subtle frequencies that made the air itself feel alive. Your high command fears what they do not understand. As did our eternal consensus, when the first echoes began. On the screens, more crystals broke through the earth at every major battlefield. The song had taken on a life of its own, spreading like a benevolent virus through both armies. But it wasn't just the military. Civilian populations on both sides reported strange dreams, forgotten memories surfacing, and an inexplicable urge to sing. The discord is breaking, Lyra explained, gesturing to a display showing massive crystalline formations rising from the ocean floors. What was shattered is remembering how to be whole. Lieutenant Reese burst into the command center, her eyes wide with excitement. "Captain, you need to see this. The archaeologists, they've found something in the old ruins. Something that changes everything." The ruins in question lay beneath the floating islands, in the submerged remains of what both species had assumed was an ancient civilization distinct from their own. Thomas had always wondered why both humans and Vesperians had been drawn to this particular world, why so much blood had been shed over these specific islands. Now he knew. They hadn't been fighting for territory, they'd been drawn here by something older than their war, older than their civilizations. The archaeological team's footage showed massive chambers lined with crystals identical to the ones now emerging everywhere. But what caught everyone's attention were the murals, impossible artwork showing humans and Vesperians working together, their forms outlined in crystalline light, surrounded by musical notations that matched the song now playing across the planet. This was a nexus, Lyra said softly, its crystalline form resonating with the frequencies emanating from the footage. A place where both our peoples once gathered to maintain the great harmony. Before the discord, before we forgot. Colonel Webb shook his head in disbelief. "Are you saying both our species evolved just to forget all this? That makes no sense." Evolution wasn't random, Thomas realized, watching as more crystals emerged through the command center's floor, adding their voices to the growing chorus. We didn't just evolve and forget, we were shaped by the absence of the song. Everything we became was in response to its loss. The displays showed more discoveries being made hourly. Ancient technologies activated by the returning frequencies, hidden chambers revealing themselves, and most incredibly, humans and Vesperians working together as if they'd never been enemies, guided by instincts older than their conflict. "The war," Reese said, her voice filled with wonder, "it was never about us versus them. It was about finding our way back here. Back to this." Lyra's form pulsed with agreement. The discord did more than silence the song. It rewrote our histories, turned harmony into hatred. But the song remained, sleeping in your pendant, in our crystals, in the very rocks of this world, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Outside, the twin moons had taken on a crystalline sheen, their light seeming to pulse in time with the planet-wide melody. The song was growing stronger, more complex, weaving together not just music but memory, knowledge, and understanding that had been lost to both species. Thomas touched one of the newly emerged crystals, feeling the frequencies resonate through his entire being. "So what happens now? How do we explain this to everyone who isn't here to witness it?" Lyra's response was interrupted by a new sound, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The displays flickered, showing something massive moving in high orbit, something that had been invisible until this moment. "Now," Lyra said, its voice filled with both joy and trepidation, "we meet those who have been waiting for us to remember. The true guardians of the song." The war that had consumed so many lives was ending, but Thomas had a feeling their journey was just beginning. Because some songs, once remembered, change everything they touch. And this one was about to transform both their worlds forever. Resonance of truth. The object in orbit defied conventional description. It was crystalline, like the Vesperians, but also organic, like something grown rather than built. Its surface rippled with colors that shouldn't exist in normal space, and it sang, a deep, resonant tone that made the very fabric of reality vibrate in sympathy. "That's been up there this whole time?" Colonel Webb's voice was barely a whisper as they watched the massive entity through base Helios's enhanced orbital cameras. "How did we miss it?" "You missed it because you weren't ready to see it," Lyra explained, its crystalline form glowing with increased intensity. "The Guardians exist in frequencies beyond normal perception. Only the song can make them visible." Thomas watched as more objects appeared in orbit, each one unique yet clearly part of the same impossible family of beings. The song that had started with his grandmother's pendant now reached toward these cosmic entities, and they were responding. "Captain," Lieutenant Reese called from her station, "we're receiving transmissions from every human and Vesperian outpost in the system. The crystals, they're forming some kind of network." The command center's displays filled with footage from across Kepler 186f and beyond. Everywhere, the emerging crystals were linking together, creating vast geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with purpose. And within these patterns, information began to flow, not as data or language, but as pure understanding. "The archive is reactivating," Lyra said, watching the patterns with evident joy. "The crystalline network that once connected all conscious beings. Through it, we shared not just communication, but consciousness itself." The implications hit Thomas like a physical force. That's why the war felt so wrong. Deep down, we were fighting ourselves. The displays suddenly shifted, showing something new emerging from the depths of the planet. Massive crystalline structures, ancient beyond comprehension, were rising from the oceans, their surfaces covered in symbols that matched those from Thomas's shattered pendant. "The song does more than unite," Lyra explained as they watched the impossible structures emerge. "It creates." The crystals aren't just communication devices, they're tools for manipulating reality itself. Reality that responds to harmony, to intention aligned with the universal frequencies. As if to demonstrate, Lyra touched one of the nearby crystals. The air shimmered, and suddenly they could see the true nature of their surroundings, layers of reality normally invisible to human perception. The base itself sat at the intersection of energy lines that crisscrossed the planet, lines that pulsed with the same frequencies as the song. Colonel Webb stepped back, overwhelmed. "Are you saying we've been fighting over a planet that's actually some kind of ancient technology?" "Not technology as you understand it," Lyra corrected. "The ancients, those who came before both our peoples, didn't build machines. They grew them, shaped them through harmony with the underlying frequencies of existence. What you call technology, we once achieved through song." The orbital entities, the Guardians, were moving now, arranging themselves in patterns that mirrored the crystalline networks below. Their song joined the planetary chorus, adding layers of complexity that made Thomas's mind strain to comprehend. "But why show themselves now?" Reese asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. "Why wait until this moment?" Thomas felt the answer resonating through the crystals. "Because we weren't ready. We needed to remember on our own, to choose harmony over discord." The displays showed more changes spreading across the planet. The crystalline networks were affecting everything they touched, not destroying but transforming, revealing the true nature of their surroundings. Buildings that had seemed mundane now showed their connection to the ancient patterns. Weapons that had dealt death were becoming dormant, their materials responding to frequencies that reminded them of their true purpose. "The war," Thomas said slowly, understanding dawning, "it was never just about us. We were caught in something bigger, a choice between remembering who we really are or staying locked in the discord." Lyra's form pulsed with approval. "And you chose to remember. Both our peoples did. That's why the Guardians reveal themselves now. Because finally, after so long, we're ready to rejoin the greater harmony." Above them, the Guardians' song reached a crescendo that shook the very foundations of reality. The crystalline networks blazed with light, and in that moment, everyone, human and Vesperian alike, felt the truth that had been hidden for so long. They were never meant to be enemies. They were meant to be parts of the same grand chorus, creators and shapers of reality itself. And now, as the ancient knowledge flowed through the reactivated archive, they would remember how to sing together once again. The war was over, but the true journey was just beginning. Because some songs don't just. Symphony of Silence. The transformation of Kepler 186f continued with breathtaking speed. Where once battle lines had divided the floating islands, crystalline bridges now formed, connecting former enemy positions with structures that seemed to be made of frozen music. The Guardians remained in orbit, their massive forms casting shadows that sparkled with impossible colors. Thomas stood with Lyra at the edge of what had once been forward operating base Helios. The military installation had merged with the crystalline network, its harsh angles softening into organic curves that hummed with purpose. Around them, humans and Vesperians worked together, guided by knowledge flowing through the restored archive. "We're receiving reports from Earth and the Vesperian homeworld," Lieutenant Reese announced, her voice tight with emotion. "The song, it's spreading through every colony, every outpost. The crystals are emerging everywhere." Colonel Webb studied a holographic display showing the phenomenon's progress. "High Command is in chaos. Half of them are resisting, calling it an invasion. The other half." He paused, shaking his head in wonder. "They're singing." "Fear is natural," Lyra observed, its crystalline form reflecting the light of the twin moons. "The Discord taught us to resist change, to see difference as threat. But the song cannot be denied once it's remembered." Thomas watched as another Guardian descended from orbit, its massive form moving with impossible grace. As it approached, he felt rather than heard its question, a complex harmony that resonated through his very being. "They're asking for representatives," Lyra translated, though Thomas had somehow understood. "Both human and Vesperian. It's time to learn what was lost." The decision was made almost instantly. Thomas, Colonel Webb, Lieutenant Reese, and 3 other humans would join Lyra and a group of Vesperians. The Guardians' approach created a path of crystalline light, a bridge between the ground and sky. As they ascended, Thomas felt the song changing him, awakening senses he never knew he had. He could see the frequencies that bound reality together, could feel the vibrations that connected all conscious beings. The others experienced similar awakenings, their gasps of wonder adding to the ever-present melody. The Guardian's interior defied physics as humans understood it. Spaces folded into themselves, corridors seemed to extend forever while occupying no space at all. And everywhere, there was music, not sound as they knew it, but pure harmonic energy that carried information, emotion, and memory. "This is how it was," Lyra explained, moving through the impossible space with familiar ease. "Before the Discord, we all lived in harmony with these frequencies. The Guardians weren't our rulers but our teachers, showing us how to shape reality through song. Images formed around them, history written in light and sound. They saw their ancestors, human and Vesperian alike, working together to create wonders. Cities that grew from musical seeds, ships that sailed on waves of harmony, healing accomplished through perfectly tuned frequencies." "The Discord," Webb breathed, understanding dawning in his eyes. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" The Guardian's response came as a mournful chord that made the crystals dim. Through the archive's connection, they all saw the truth. A faction of both species, fearful of their own potential, had deliberately silenced the song. They had believed that such power was too great, that it would lead to destruction. "They created the very catastrophe they feared," Lyra said softly. "In silencing the song, they fractured reality itself. Both our peoples collapsed into warfare, forgetting who we were, what we could be together. But now the song was returning, and with it, the true power that both species had forsaken." Thomas watched in awe as the Guardian showed them what was possible, how the harmonies could heal worlds, create new forms of life, even fold space itself. "This is what we were fighting for," Reese realized, her voice filled with wonder. Not the islands, not resources. Deep down, we were fighting to remember this. The Guardians' next communication came not as words but as pure understanding. The time of discord was ending, but the challenge ahead was perhaps even greater. Both species would need to learn to wield the song responsibly, to create rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm. Some will resist, Webb said, thinking of the military commands on both sides who were even now trying to maintain the old conflicts. They will, Lyra agreed. But they cannot fight the truth of their own being forever. The song lives in all of us. It always has. As if in response, a new harmony began, not from the Guardian, not from the crystals, but from within themselves. Humans and Vesperians, once bitter enemies, now sang together, their voices creating patterns of light that danced through the Guardians' chambers. The war that had consumed so many lives was transforming into something else, a revolution of consciousness, a remembering of ancient truths. Because some songs don't just change what we do. They change who we are.